The morning sun filtered through the tall glass windows of the downtown courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. The air was filled with the low hum of activity, a mixture of footsteps echoing against the walls, the quiet murmur of journalists exchanging notes, and the occasional sharp call of a bailiff enforcing order. Today was no ordinary day in court. The case had captured the attention of the city, and people from every corner had flocked to witness what had been billed as a high-stakes proceeding involving community safety and law enforcement integrity. Spectators, lawyers, and reporters all jostled for position, their collective presence forming a thick atmosphere of tension, anticipation, and subtle excitement. Amid the sea of suits and formal attire, a small, almost imperceptible figure moved with quiet determination. A mother, Anna, carefully guided her 2-year-old daughter by the hand as they navigated through the crowded lobby. Short legs moved quickly, her tiny sneakers tapping against the floor, while her large, curious eyes darted left and right. She seemed captivated by the courthouse itself, the towering pillars, the dark wooden benches, and the rows of faces waiting for the trial to begin. Anna smiled softly, a mix of pride and nervousness washing over her. Bringing a toddler to a courtroom was unconventional, but had insisted, grabbing her mother's hand that morning with surprising determination. The security checkpoint loomed ahead. Anna lifted up slightly to place her on the belt for the metal detector, careful to keep the child calm amid the beeping and pat-downs that made other children whimper and cry. However, remained unusually composed. Her large brown eyes focused on the uniformed officers, not with fear but with fascination. The officers, noting her calm demeanor, exchanged amused glances, whispering quietly to one another about how children often brought unexpected light to otherwise tense settings. Anna guided through, offering gentle reassurances and soft pats on the back, while clutched a small stuffed bear close to her chest, a bear she had insisted must watch Rex today, although Anna had no idea what she meant. Once inside the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted. The space was grand, with high ceilings, polished wood, and the unmistakable scent of leather-bound law books. Reporters had already staked out positions, cameras lined up to capture every word spoken at the bench. Jurors, neatly seated in their designated area, whispered quietly among themselves, scanning the room for any signs of distraction or bias. The defendant sat at the center table, flanked by attorneys who adjusted their notes and shuffled through documents, preparing for the day ahead. At the front, the judge, a stern yet composed figure, surveyed the room with practiced authority, ensuring that decorum would be maintained no matter what unexpected events might arise. Now seated on her mother's lap was unlike the other attendees. She wasn't scanning the courtroom for legal drama or the seriousness of adult discourse. Her gaze had already found something, or someone at the front of the room. A large German shepherd, immaculately groomed, stood beside a police officer, tail wagging gently, eyes calm yet alert. His tiny hand rose almost imperceptibly, her fingers pointing steadily at the dog as if to say, "I see you." Anna noticed but assumed it was merely typical toddler curiosity. She whispered softly to her daughter, "Focus on mommy, honey. Let's stay quiet." Yet's focus never wavered. The bailiff called the courtroom to order, his voice echoing through the high-ceilinged chamber. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Wilson." The room responded with practiced obedience, the scrape of chairs against the floor mixing with the shuffle of papers. Undeterred, tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving the dog. She murmured something under her breath, barely audible, but Anna caught it. "Rex, Rex." She blinked, surprised, unsure if her daughter was imagining the connection. The prosecutor stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Ladies and today we are here to examine an incident involving law enforcement procedures and public safety concerns," he began, his voice measured, authoritative. Cameras shifted, capturing his every gesture, and reporters scribbled notes furiously. However, remained entranced by the dog. Rex, sensing her attention, gave a soft whine, tilting his head in recognition. It was as if the dog and the toddler had an unspoken understanding, a bond invisible to everyone else but unmistakable to them. Whispers spread quietly across the courtroom. A few jurors leaned slightly forward, catching unwavering attention on the dog. Some reporters murmured into their microphones, joking softly, "Looks like someone's making friends already." Yet the tension remained high. The trial itself was serious, with implications that could affect law enforcement credibility. No one expected that a small child could momentarily shift the atmosphere from tense and formal to unexpectedly heartwarming. As the prosecutor continued to outline the case, detailing the events that had led to the trial's focus intensified. She squirmed slightly in her mother's lap, pointing more emphatically now, whispering her observations to herself. Anna's curiosity grew. "What is it, sweetie?" she asked softly. His response was simple, yet carried a certainty that belied her age. She said the words quietly, almost as if speaking to the dog directly. "That, Rex." The courtroom went silent. A low murmur passed among the attorneys, jurors, and reporters as the judge paused mid-note, raising an eyebrow in surprise. Was it possible that this toddler had recognized the police dog? Cameras immediately swung to capture its expression, her tiny hands clutching the stuffed bear while her wide eyes stayed locked on Rex. The moment, though brief, was electric, an unanticipated flash of innocence piercing through the formality of the courtroom. Officer, the handler of Rex, took note of the small voice echoing through the courtroom. Kneeling slightly to meet's gaze, he whispered softly, "Do you remember me, little one?" Nodded eagerly, the first hint of a smile crossing her face. The judge, trying to maintain composure, allowed a brief pause in proceedings to acknowledge the rare spectacle before him. Journalists murmured, their pens freezing on the page, cameras capturing the unlikely interaction between toddler and law enforcement. In that moment, the courtroom transformed. The rigid tension that had dominated the morning shifted into something softer, lighter, and surprisingly human. Conversation slowed, jurors exchanged amused glances, and the audience leaned in, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Unaware of the attention she had drawn, simply pointed at Rex, a connection so pure and genuine that even the most stoic adults felt a flicker of warmth in their hearts. Anna smiled, holding her daughter close, realizing that presence had brought something entirely unexpected into the room, a reminder that even in the most serious settings, innocence and honesty could command attention in ways adults rarely anticipated. Today's trial, already noteworthy for its legal importance, had been transformed into a stage for one small child and a loyal police dog. Two seemingly ordinary beings, unnoticed at first, had the power to captivate and disarm an entire courtroom, leaving a lasting impression on all who were present. As the judge prepared to call the next witness, he paused for just a moment, glancing at Rex. For a brief second, a smile flickered across his face. The courtroom, despite its formal atmosphere, had collectively recognized the magic of the moment. A tiny human and a canine partner had reminded everyone why moments of genuine connection mattered, even amid the seriousness of justice. In that instant, had done more than observe. She had transformed the room, signaling that sometimes the smallest voices make the loudest impact. And so, the morning unfolded with a new energy. Spectators who had arrived for legal drama found themselves captivated by a toddler's intuition. Lawyers who had prepared for hours of evidence and argument were quietly enchanted by the scene playing out at the front of the room. Cameras captured every angle, ensuring that this unusual moment would soon reach audiences far beyond the courthouse walls. What had started as a routine morning in court was now shaping into a story no one would forget, a story that would ripple through the community, the news, and the hearts of everyone present. By the time the bailiff called for the first witness to be sworn in, his tiny voice had already left an indelible mark. She sat calmly, clutching her bear, eyes still occasionally flicking toward Rex, who sat obediently by his handler. No one knew what this day would bring, but everyone agreed on one thing: had already changed the mood, the expectations, and the atmosphere of the courtroom, all with a simple, heartfelt recognition. And as the trial began in earnest, All eyes were now on the bond between toddler and dog, a bond that promised to make this courtroom session unforgettable. The courtroom's atmosphere, initially tense with legal formality, began to shift subtly as the next phase of the trial unfolded. At the front of the room, Officer adjusted his uniform and gave Rex a reassuring pat. The German shepherd, tall, alert, and radiating quiet confidence, sat attentively, his ears pricked and head held high. Every movement was precise, trained, and disciplined. To the adult audience, Rex was a symbol of law enforcement, efficiency, protection, and order. Yet, too, he was something entirely different, familiar, comforting, and somehow trustworthy. Her tiny hand still hovered in midair, pointing occasionally as if to communicate her recognition. The prosecutor cleared his throat, projecting a calm authority. "Ladies and I would like to introduce the next witness, Officer and his K-9 partner, Rex. Today, they will help us understand the events that led to this case and demonstrate the vital role of law enforcement in our community." The words, delivered with the weight of officialdom, were meant to command attention. Yet despite the gravity of the introduction, the room's focus repeatedly drifted to his tiny frame and her unwavering gaze at the dog. Officer began his testimony, speaking with the careful cadence of a seasoned law enforcement professional. "Rex is not only a partner, he's a trained professional. He assists in narcotics detection, tracks suspects, and provides safety for our officers and the public. His record speaks for itself, numerous incidents where his actions prevented harm or apprehended dangerous individuals." The courtroom, including jurors, reporters, and attorneys, absorbed the words with attention. It was an impressive, meticulously detailed, and clearly impressive. Despite the serious tone, his attention never wavered. She leaned forward slightly in her mother's lap, her eyes wide, unblinking, and utterly fixed on Rex. Fingers extended, she whispered under her breath, "Rex, Rex." Anna, sensing that something remarkable was unfolding, held her daughter closer. She glanced around, noticing a few curious smiles from the audience, the subtle chuckle of a court clerk, and even the twitch of a camera lens capturing this unusual interaction. It was becoming clear that recognition had transformed the courtroom into something more human, more unpredictable, and far more emotionally charged than the case alone demanded. The prosecutor nodded to Officer, prompting him to demonstrate some of Rex's skills. The officer led Rex to a small section of the courtroom, away from the public seating, where he retrieved a scent sample from a bag of objects related to the case. The German shepherd sniffed intently, moving with precision and authority. To the jury and audience, the display was impressive and professional. Too, it was almost magical. She clutched her bear, whispering again, "Rex. Good boy," as if she were giving the dog encouragement. Her voice, soft yet confident, carried across the room just enough to elicit smiles from nearby spectators. A reporter, seated near the front, whispered into a recorder, unable to resist commenting on the unusual scene. "I've covered hundreds of trials," she murmured, "but I've never seen a toddler so captivated, so connected to a witness, or should I say, a K-9 witness." Others nodded, their attention torn between the formal proceedings and the heartwarming spectacle unfolding before them. Even the judge, usually focused entirely on procedure, allowed himself a subtle smile, acknowledging that had brought an unexpected humanity to the room. Officer, sensing the room's growing distraction, attempted to refocus the audience on Rex's professional accomplishments. "Rex has been instrumental in several operations," he explained, pointing to photographs displayed on a nearby screen. The images showed Rex in action, retrieving evidence, assisting in community events, and working closely with other officers. Each photo was meticulously captioned with dates, incidents, and outcomes. The courtroom was impressed. Yet every so often, eyes, especially, would flick back to the dog himself. The living, breathing presence of Rex had more impact than photographs or reports could ever convey. His recognition wasn't just charming, it was uncanny. Officer noticed her pointing repeatedly and whispering the dog's name. He leaned closer, kneeling to her level, and asked gently, "Do you remember me?" Small head bobbed in agreement, her eyes bright and focused. It was a quiet affirmation, but in a room of hundreds, the subtle connection between a toddler and a K-9 partner was astonishing. The murmurs among the audience grew, a mixture of disbelief, amusement, and admiration. How could a child so young recognize a trained police dog with such certainty? Anna whispered softly to her daughter, "You know him." Response was clear, confident, and precise. "Rex." Two simple words that held profound weight in the courtroom. The judge raised his eyebrows, signaling for a brief pause as reporters jostled to capture the moment. Cameras focused on small frame, capturing her bright eyes, her pointing finger, and her whispered declaration. The courtroom's serious tone wavered, giving way to a mixture of astonishment, amusement, and admiration. Had not only recognized Rex, she had captured the attention of everyone present, turning a standard courtroom proceeding into a viral-worthy spectacle. Officer smiled warmly, gently patting Rex's side. "Rex remembers you too," he murmured. The dog tilted his head, wagging his tail slightly, acknowledging his presence. The reaction, though subtle, sent ripples across the audience. Even seasoned journalists, accustomed to witnessing dramatic testimonies, found themselves leaning forward, captivated by the unexpected human-canine bond. Social media cameras live-streamed the moment, and within minutes, whispers began spreading. Toddler recognizes police dog in court. The story, though not officially in the news yet, had already begun to circulate, promising national attention. The prosecutor, attempting to regain focus on the case, directed officer to describe the incident in question. On the day of the incident, Rex was deployed to assist in a narcotics investigation, he explained. His keen sense of smell and training enabled us to identify crucial evidence, prevent potential danger, and maintain public safety. His service exemplifies the dedication and professionalism of our K-9 units. Jurors listened attentively, some taking notes, but many couldn't help sneaking glances at, whose small gestures and unwavering recognition of Rex had transformed the trial from a formal legal proceeding into a scene infused with unexpected warmth and fascination. Fascination with Rex was more than childlike curiosity. It was recognition, memory, and instinct, a small but undeniable demonstration of the ways humans, even at a very young age, connect with animals. Psychologists would later remark that such moments highlighted early cognitive development, memory retention, and emotional intelligence in toddlers. But at that moment in the courtroom, the significance was emotional, social, and almost magical. A simple recognition had shifted the mood of an entire room. Even the judge, who rarely showed emotion, allowed a faint smile to cross his face. He adjusted his robe, gesturing for order, but his eyes betrayed amusement. "Order in the courtroom," he said softly, though his tone carried a hint of warmth that had not been present earlier. Oblivious to the formalities, continued to gaze at Rex, her small fingers twitching with excitement. The judge, the lawyers, and the audience all realized that the day's proceedings had been permanently transformed. What began as a standard trial had unexpectedly become a story of connection, recognition, and innocence. As officer concluded his demonstration, Rex obediently returned to his position at the front of the courtroom. The murmurs among the spectators quieted slightly, replaced by a collective awareness of the unusual yet profoundly human moment they had just witnessed. Still clinging to her bear, looked up at her mother and whispered, "Rex, good boy." Anna's heart swelled with pride and amusement, fully realizing that her daughter had captured something extraordinary, a moment that would be remembered far beyond the walls of the courthouse. The courtroom settled as the next witness was called, but the energy lingered. Everyone present had shared in the unexpected magic of a toddler's recognition, had become the silent center of attention, a tiny bridge between the serious, rigid world of law and the simple, honest world of childhood perception. Cameras clicked, reporters jotted notes, and the public would later marvel at the video that captured innocence, clarity, and remarkable memory. By the time the morning session ended, it was clear that the story was bigger than the trial itself. had done something extraordinary without realizing it. She had humanized law enforcement, softened the courtroom, and provided a moment of light-hearted wonder amid the gravity of justice. Rex, loyal and attentive, had reciprocated, bridging the gap between professional duty and simple companionship. The courtroom, for a brief but unforgettable period, was united in shared awe, amusement, and admiration. Its recognition of Rex had set the stage for a day no one would forget. Every subsequent testimony, every legal argument, would now be colored by the memory of a toddler who had spoken two simple words and captured the hearts of everyone present. It was a reminder that even in formal, serious spaces, innocence and clarity could command attention, influence mood, and leave an enduring impression. The morning had begun as a routine trial, but it had evolved into a story about memory, recognition, and the unexpected ways a child and a dog could change the world around them. The courtroom had settled into a rhythm of formal proceedings, yet the presence of a small toddler had already shifted the atmosphere in ways no one anticipated. Sat quietly on her mother's lap, her small hands clutching the stuffed bear tightly, eyes locked on the German shepherd that stood with unwavering attention beside Officer. The dog seemed to respond to her presence, tilting his head slightly, ears alert, as though he recognized not just a friendly face, but a familiar bond. It was an extraordinary moment in the mundane, meticulously ordered world of a courthouse. The prosecutor, noting the unusual attention had drawn, decided to address it cautiously. He leaned slightly toward the toddler, his voice gentle yet authoritative. "Do you know him, sweetie?" he asked, pointing subtly toward Rex. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Jurors, witnesses, and reporters all paused mid-action, curious how the question would be answered. His tiny head tilted slightly as if considering the question with the weight of a much older child. The murmurs and shuffles of the room quieted. Cameras zoomed in to capture the pivotal moment. His response was simple, almost understated, yet it carried a clarity and certainty that reverberated throughout the courtroom. She whispered two words, "That Rex." The room froze. A low gasp passed among the audience, followed by stunned silence. Jurors blinked rapidly, reporters leaned closer to their microphones, and even the judge, a man accustomed to maintaining a solemn demeanor, paused mid-note. Two words, so short, so innocent, had commanded the attention of everyone in the courtroom. The recognition was immediate, unambiguous, and profoundly human. Officer blinked in surprise, then smiled warmly, kneeling slightly to be at its level. "Well, I'll be," he said softly, his voice carrying genuine amusement and warmth. Rex, sensing the positive energy, wagged his tail gently, stepping slightly forward toward the toddler. The moment was electric, invisible lines connecting the dog, the child, and the adults in the room. It was as if time had paused for a heartbeat, allowing everyone to share in the extraordinary interaction between innocence and experience, memory and recognition. The judge, attempting to regain composure, cleared his throat. "Order in the courtroom," he said, though his tone carried a hint of amusement. He glanced down a subtle smile flickering across his face, betraying the warmth he felt despite his judicial responsibilities. The audience, caught between professional decorum and human curiosity, exchanged knowing glances. Laptops clicked, cameras recorded, and phones subtly buzzed as journalists quietly documented the scene. Social media, to those present, was already beginning to light up with whispers and rumors of the toddler who had recognized a police dog. His mother, Anna, felt a surge of pride and disbelief. She leaned closer to her daughter, whispering gently, "How do you know him?" Eyes wide with certainty blinked once, and she repeated softly, almost reverently, "Rex." It was more than recognition. It was memory, intuition, and a confidence that transcended age. Anna could hardly believe it. Her daughter, barely 2 years old, had identified a dog she had only briefly met months ago during a community safety day at her preschool. The precision and clarity were extraordinary. A ripple of murmurs spread across the courtroom. Some jurors smiled discreetly, recognizing the rare, almost magical quality of his behavior. Reporters whispered into microphones, their voices low and urgent, knowing they were witnessing a moment worth recording for posterity. "This is incredible," one murmured. "A toddler recognizes a police dog in court. Can you imagine the story?" The professional tone of the courtroom had shifted subtly toward something more human, more alive, as if two words had bridged the gap between adult authority and childlike wonder. Officer knelt beside, gently placing his hand over hers. "Rex remembers you too," he said softly. The German shepherd stepped closer, sniffing the air near his hand, tail wagging in quiet acknowledgement. Giggled softly, a high, clear sound that broke the tension and brought smiles to even the most stoic faces in the room. The interaction was seamless, natural, and profoundly moving. It was not staged, rehearsed, or forced. It was genuine connection between human and animal, between innocence and experience, unfolding in real time before dozens of witnesses. The prosecutor, recognizing that the courtroom was temporarily captivated, attempted to refocus attention on the case. "Ladies and," he said, "let us remember why we are here today." Yet even as he spoke, the energy in the room had changed. The jurors, while attentive, occasionally stole glances at and Rex. Witnesses seemed more relaxed, some smiling subtly. Even the attorneys, who prided themselves on unwavering focus, found their concentration occasionally disrupted by the charm and precision of the toddler's recognition. Two words had become a subtle but powerful influence on the human dynamics of the courtroom. Cameras captured every angle, pointing, Rex responding, officer kneeling, and the subtle reactions of the audience. Social media live streams, quietly operating in the background, picked up the audio. Within minutes, whispers turned into messages, messages into posts, and posts into a budding viral sensation. "Toddler recognizes police dog in court" became a trending phrase before the trial had even concluded. Unaware of her growing fame, continued to observe Rex, her tiny hand occasionally touching her stuffed bear for reassurance. To her, it was simple, natural, and unremarkable, but to the world watching, it was extraordinary. Anna whispered softly, trying to maintain calm, yet her heart raced. She realized that her daughter's ability to recognize Rex was not only remarkable but also emotionally powerful. In a courtroom designed for logic, evidence, and reason, a 2-year-old had introduced unpredictability, wonder, and joy. Its recognition had transformed the environment. Tense whispers had become shared smiles, formal expressions had softened, and the sterile energy of legal proceedings had been infused with life. 2 words spoken by a tiny voice had reshaped the mood entirely. Even the judge seemed momentarily affected. He adjusted his glasses, taking a breath, and glanced down with an expression that mixed amusement, curiosity, and genuine warmth. "Very well," he said slowly, his voice calm yet tinged with appreciation. "We acknowledge the unique presence of our youngest spectator." His tone, though professional, allowed for subtle acknowledgement of the extraordinary moment, signaling to everyone that its recognition was not only noted but respected. Officer gently guided Rex back to his position at the front, while watched intently. Her focus never wavered. She seemed to understand, in her own childlike way, that this was more than a dog. Rex was a companion, a figure of trust, and now, undeniably, part of a shared moment that bridged the gap between childhood innocence and adult responsibility. The audience, jurors, and reporters alike absorbed the significance, had created an interaction that would be remembered far beyond the confines of the courtroom. A soft wave of laughter moved through the gallery, subtle but pervasive. Some spectators whispered to one another, marveling at how a toddler could command the attention of an entire courtroom. Journalists quietly typed, capturing the words, expressions, and gestures for immediate publication. It was a scene that combined humor, charm, and profound humanity, an intersection of innocence and authority rarely witnessed. Its ability to recognize Rex, and her calm, confident delivery, became the defining moment of the morning. As the prosecutor prepared to continue with the legal proceedings, he paused, clearly considering how to navigate the unexpected human element that had just emerged. The jurors, meanwhile, adjusted their seating slightly, some smiling at, some quietly acknowledging the subtle disruption of their routine. Even the defense attorney, typically reserved and formal, allowed a small smile to appear, appreciating the unusual balance of professionalism and warmth introduced by a tiny voice. Had unintentionally become the emotional center of the courtroom. Its recognition of Rex was more than a cute moment. It symbolized trust, memory, and instinct. Psychologists later analyzed similar cases, noting that children of her age often retain vivid memories of positive experiences. This recognition, coupled with her confidence in expressing it, highlighted a profound cognitive and emotional understanding. Yet at that moment in the courtroom, technical analysis mattered less than the palpable reaction of everyone present. The connection between child and dog had captured hearts, softened attitudes, and reminded adults of a world beyond procedure, rules, and evidence. The courtroom resumed its proceedings, but the energy had shifted permanently. Remained calm on her mother's lap, her small hand occasionally gesturing toward Rex, eyes wide with fascination. The judge, the jurors, the attorneys, and the audience, all of them, had been touched by the moment. Cameras captured every nuance, reporters whispered quietly to one another, and social media had already begun disseminating the story. A toddler's two words that become more than recognition. They were the spark of a shared, unforgettable human experience. By the end of the morning, it was undeniable, had made her mark. Two words had commanded attention, created laughter, softened tension, and connected human and animal in a way that transcended the courtroom. Officer patted Rex gently, giggled, and the audience collectively recognized that the world was, for a brief moment, a little lighter, a little warmer, and infinitely more human. In those two simple words, the courtroom had found joy, innocence, and a reminder of the unpredictable magic of everyday life. Had changed the dynamic of the day, ensuring that the trial would not only be remembered for legal outcomes, but also for the remarkable, heartwarming interaction between a toddler and a police dog. It was a moment that would echo far beyond the marble walls of the courthouse. The courtroom, once a chamber of strict formality and subdued tension, erupted with a new kind of energy. The two simple words from that sent ripples through the room that no one anticipated. Whispers filled the air, quickly evolving into soft laughter and quiet chuckles that spread across rows of spectators, jurors, and even attorneys. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing the moment that would soon captivate not only those present but an entire city. The courtroom's atmosphere, tense and rigid just moments before, was now infused with warmth, amusement, and human connection. The judge, typically composed and authoritative, allowed a small smile to flicker across his face. He adjusted his glasses and looked down observing the toddler's innocent, confident demeanor. Even he could not help but feel the charm of the moment. "Very well," he said in a calm, measured tone. "Let us allow a brief pause to acknowledge the unique presence of our youngest spectator." Though formal, his words carried acknowledgement and subtle admiration. For the first time that morning, the courtroom collectively exhaled. Mother Anna whispered softly to her daughter, brushing strands of hair from her forehead. "You're amazing," she said, barely containing her pride. His wide brown eyes sparkled, and she giggled softly, unaware of the magnitude of her recognition. Her small hands fidgeted with her stuffed bear as her gaze remained fixed on Rex, who now stepped a little closer, as if acknowledging the bond they shared. The simplicity of the moment, child meeting dog, was quietly profound, piercing through the seriousness that usually dominated a courthouse. Officer kneeling beside Rex gave a soft chuckle. "Rex remembers you, little one," he said gently. The dog tilted his head slightly, tail wagging in a slow, measured manner. It was confirmation of a friendship she had long remembered. To the courtroom, it was evidence of an extraordinary human-canine connection, tangible in the reactions of both participants. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, captivated not only by the interaction, but by the realization that recognition was genuine, accurate, and heartfelt. Reporters, realizing the gravity of the moment, whispered to one another and scribbled notes furiously. Laptops and cameras were repositioned to capture every nuance. One journalist murmured into her microphone, "This is incredible, a toddler recognizing a police dog in court. We have to cover this." Another nodded, fingers flying across the keyboard to capture a live update. Within minutes, social media began to buzz, with images and short clips of pointing at Rex circulating on live feeds and instant messaging platforms. The story was already trending before any formal reporting could begin. Jurors, too, were affected. Their expressions, previously marked by neutral attentiveness, softened. Some exchanged discreet smiles, while others nodded in quiet approval. Even seasoned jurors, accustomed to witnessing testimony, evidence, and sometimes dry procedural moments, were now engaged on a different level. The emotional charge of innocence, recognition, and genuine joy had created a subtle but undeniable impact on the room. Two words had transformed a procedural environment into a space where humanity and empathy were visibly present. The audience members began whispering excitedly among themselves. "Did you hear that?" one woman asked, leaning toward her neighbor. "A toddler knows the police dog," another chuckled quietly, nodding. "I've never seen anything like this in court before. She's incredible." The atmosphere was no longer just formal observation. It had become communal engagement. Spectators were united by wonder, amusement, and admiration for the child, whose brief declaration had captured attention far beyond her years. Anna felt a mix of pride, disbelief, and nervousness. She glanced at the reporters and jurors, realizing that actions were already making waves. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Who knew she'd do this?" Unaware of her effect, simply smiled, giggled, and focused her attention fully on Rex. The dog, calm and well-trained, reciprocated the attention with a gentle wag of his tail, creating a loop of recognition that seemed to transcend age, species, and expectation. Officer, sensing both the professional significance and human charm of the moment, continued speaking with measured enthusiasm. "Rex has worked with many children, attended school safety events, and participated in community outreach," he explained. "But today's interaction reminds us that the bond between humans and animals can be immediate, intuitive, and memorable, even for the youngest among us." The courtroom hung on every word, not only for the testimony, but for the affirmation of the emotional resonance that recognition had already established. The judge, now fully aware of the courtroom's charged atmosphere, allowed a short recess. "We will resume in 10 minutes, he announced, though his voice carried subtle warmth. Spectators shifted in their seats, some smiling, others whispering quietly. His recognition of Rex had not only entertained but subtly shifted perceptions. It reminded everyone that even the smallest voice, the tiniest perspective, could command attention, bring joy, and remind adults of the value of innocence in a complex, structured environment. As spectators chatted quietly, this recognition became a topic of quiet fascination. Some whispered theories about how a toddler could recall a dog she had only met briefly. Psychologists later cited her as an example of early memory retention and recognition skills in children, highlighting how young minds can connect experiences with astonishing accuracy. To the present courtroom, however, it was a moment of genuine delight, bridging the gap between law, procedure, and human connection. Outside the courtroom, news of the interaction spread quickly. Smartphones captured video clips of two words, and short snippets began circulating across social media platforms. "Toddler identifies police dog in court," read one caption. "Unbelievable innocence meets law enforcement," tweeted another. The moment, though fleeting in the grand scheme of the trial, had already captured national attention. This recognition of Rex had transcended the courtroom walls, becoming a story that people everywhere could relate to, admire, and share. Inside the courtroom, continued to focus on Rex. Her mother whispered reassuring words, stroking her daughter's hair gently. His quiet observation and pointing gestures created a moment of subtle magic, a child's unfiltered reaction affecting an adult world of formality. Spectators leaned forward, smiling, sharing the private understanding that the moment was exceptional, heartwarming, and unforgettable. Even those who had arrived expecting a dry, procedural day found themselves caught up in the innocence and joy represented. The bond between Rex continued to be evident as Officer knelt beside the dog, guiding him to respond gently to the toddler's attention. "Rex knows you," he said softly. The dog shifted slightly, tilting his head and wagging his tail. The audience watched, captivated by the display of mutual recognition, trust, and calm. The room, once dominated by tense anticipation, was now alive with warmth, curiosity, and a collective sense of wonder. By mid-morning, the courtroom had transformed from a place of purely formal legal proceedings into a shared human experience. Its recognition of Rex had softened the atmosphere, allowed for laughter, and brought joy without compromising the dignity of the trial. Jurors, attorneys, and spectators alike had been reminded of the importance of innocence, the power of genuine connection, and the subtle ways that small gestures can impact even the most structured environments. The pause in proceedings allowed the participants to reflect on the extraordinary nature of recognition. Spectators exchanged stories of similar moments in their own lives, jurors quietly shared smiles, and reporters whispered updates to colleagues outside the courtroom. The subtle charm of the moment became an undercurrent that would continue to influence the trial, reminding everyone that behind legal arguments and evidence, human connection and empathy remained powerful forces. As the courtroom prepared to resume, its recognition of Rex lingered in the minds of all present. Two simple words, delivered with clarity and confidence, had elicited laughter, astonishment, and admiration. They had transformed a procedural morning into a story of innocence, intuition, and emotional resonance. The audience understood that small voice had made a lasting impression, a reminder that even the youngest observers can leave indelible marks on those around them. Still clutching her stuffed bear, turned her gaze toward her mother and whispered softly, "Rex, good boy." The courtroom's subtle energy shifted once again, a final wave of laughter and warmth passing through the audience. Cameras clicked, phones buzzed, and the moment was captured from every angle, ensuring that the story would be remembered far beyond the walls of the courthouse. For it was simple recognition. For the courtroom, it was a reminder of the extraordinary and the ordinary, a testament to the ways innocence and empathy can transform even the most serious of environments. By the time the recess ended, had already cemented her place in the collective memory of the courtroom. Spectators returned to their seats with smiles lingering on their faces. Reporters and jurors alike whispered to one another, still marveling at the toddler's clear recognition. Officer and Rex took their places at the front of the courtroom, ready to continue with professional composure, yet aware that the audience's hearts had been quietly won over by an innocent child. Even as the trial resumed, the courtroom carried a subtle, enduring warmth. Two words had left an impression that would last far beyond the morning session. The recognition had bridged childhood and adulthood, professionalism and playfulness, law and human connection. It was a simple but powerful reminder. Sometimes, the smallest voices speak with the greatest clarity, and even brief moments of innocence can create lasting impact on the world around them. By the time the courtroom reconvened after the brief recess, the energy in the room had shifted completely. What had begun as a standard, serious legal proceeding was now infused with an unmistakable sense of anticipation, warmth, and amusement. Jurors whispered among themselves, glancing discreetly toward, who remained perched on her mother's lap, clutching her stuffed bear tightly. Her wide brown eyes, fixed on Rex, seemed to shine with quiet satisfaction. Spectators leaned forward, murmuring softly, sharing smiles and gestures that indicated the room had collectively recognized the extraordinary moment. The judge, though maintaining his authority, allowed a subtle nod toward the young toddler and her mother. "We shall proceed," he said, his voice firm yet tinged with a calm warmth. The audience responded, some with a soft chuckle, acknowledging that the morning's proceedings had been unexpectedly enlivened by his presence. Cameras adjusted, reporters repositioned themselves, and a few jurors couldn't help but exchange amused glances as the trial resumed. The courtroom's formal rhythm now carried a new, lively undercurrent. Outside the courthouse, however, the story of and Rex had already begun to take on a life of its own. A brief video clip captured on a smartphone, pointing at Rex and saying those two simple words. That's Rex was circulating on social media almost immediately. Within minutes, the clip was shared by hundreds, then thousands. Captions and hashtags began to appear. Toddler meets police dog, Rex and Courtroom Surprise, each spreading across platforms with astonishing speed. The viral momentum was undeniable. Ordinary citizens, law enforcement supporters, and families shared the story, marveling at the adorable and remarkably accurate recognition of a 2-year-old. Reporters covering the trial began integrating the moment into their updates. In a courtroom moment that has captivated our city, a toddler named recognized a police dog named Rex during testimony. One anchor explained, voice full of amazement. Her 2 words, simple, clear, and confident, have inspired laughter, admiration, and even tears among those present. This viral sensation is already trending online. The story quickly caught the attention of local newspapers, online news outlets, and eventually national media. A courtroom that had once been solemn and procedural was now a stage for human connection, laughter, and a heartwarming viral sensation. In the courtroom itself, its recognition continued to influence the proceedings subtly. Jurors, attorneys, and spectators had all been reminded of the humanity behind the case. The prosecutor, aware of the softening effect on the room, spoke with renewed care and empathy. "Let us remember," he said, "that these proceedings, though serious, involve real people experiences and community safety. But it is also moments like these that remind us of the importance of trust, connection, and compassion." His words, while professional, resonated differently in a room still infused with the warmth of innocence and Rex's gentle presence. Officer, meanwhile, quietly observed the growing attention on both and Rex. He knew that the dog had been part of countless operations, seen and documented in numerous professional contexts. Yet here in the courtroom, the bond between the two had transcended official duty. Rex's calm demeanor, combined with clear recognition, demonstrated the emotional depth and subtle intelligence of K9 partners. The connection, witnessed by dozens, would soon be shared with thousands more. Simple observation had become a story of community, trust, and shared human-animal experience. Anna's mother felt a mixture of pride, astonishment, and mild anxiety. She whispered softly to her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "People are going to see this everywhere," she said, half in amusement and half in awe. Giggled, tilting her head toward Rex, her small voice muffled as she whispered, "Good boy." Anna realized that her daughter's actions, simple as they were, had created a viral moment that would resonate far beyond their expectations. She tried to imagine the reactions of friends, family, and strangers, already sharing the video on social media platforms. Back inside the courtroom, whispers and soft laughter persisted. Reporters jotted notes, cameras recorded reactions, and spectators occasionally glanced at their phones, checking for updates or sharing the now famous clip. The story was spreading rapidly, a reminder of how moments of innocence can intersect with technology to create widespread cultural impact. Unaware of her viral status, remained fully engaged with Rex. Her simple gestures, quiet whispers, and unfiltered curiosity continued to command attention, subtly influencing the human dynamics of the courtroom. As the trial resumed, the professional proceedings continued alongside the growing awareness of the viral sensation. Witnesses were called, evidence presented, and testimony delivered, yet the undercurrent of recognition persisted. Jurors occasionally exchanged subtle smiles or glances toward the toddler, their formal demeanor softened by the shared awareness of what they had witnessed. The courtroom, though returning to its purpose, carried a new energy, one informed not by tension or stress, but by human connection, joy, and the simple power of recognition. Social media engagement exploded as local reporters shared official clips and photographs. Courtroom erupts after toddler identifies police dog, read one headline. Two words that shocked everyone. That's Rex, reported another. Parents, children, law enforcement enthusiasts, and ordinary citizens commented, shared, and tagged friends, spreading the story far beyond the courtroom walls. News outlets highlight its calm composure, her clear recognition, and Rex's gentle responses. The viral moment became an instant cultural touchstone, a story of innocence, memory, and the unexpected ways small voices can capture global attention. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, spectators began reflecting on the implications of the moment. Its recognition had reminded everyone that legal proceedings, often seen as rigid and impersonal, could also contain humanity, humor, and moments of pure connection. The shared smiles, quiet laughter, and collective appreciation of two words created a sense of unity among strangers, jurors, and court staff alike. The courtroom had become a space where professionalism and warmth coexisted, reminding everyone present that justice was not only about procedure, but about the people it served. Simple recognition also had a subtle impact on the attorneys and the legal teams. They observed how human moments could soften witnesses, testimony, influence audience engagement, and foster empathy in the courtroom. The prosecutor noted that public perception, social media engagement, and emotional resonance were becoming factors that, while unofficial, could influence the interpretation of the trial. Yet all agreed that had achieved this naturally, without intention or awareness of her broader effect. Her innocence had created influence in a world typically governed by rules, logic, and authority. The judge, recognizing the courtroom's shared human experience, allowed small gestures of acknowledgement while maintaining decorum. He nodded toward and Rex, signaling quiet approval. The room responded subtly, the collective energy tempered with respect yet enriched by amusement. Laughter occasionally rippled through spectators, journalists typed furiously, and even jurors exchanged knowing glances. Had transformed a procedural environment into a place of connection, wonder, and shared appreciation for the unexpected joy that innocence can bring. Officer, standing beside Rex, allowed the dog to interact gently with once again. She reached out tentatively, patting Rex's side while whispering encouraging words. The subtle, calm interaction reinforced the bond, showcasing how familiarity and recognition create trust between human and canine companions. The audience, captivated by the exchange, observed the profound impact of empathy, memory, and nonverbal communication. For many present, this moment would be remembered not for legal arguments, but for the warmth and humanity it inspired. Outside the courthouse, story spread like wildfire. Parents shared clips with children. Law enforcement departments highlighted the importance of community engagement, and social media users marveled at the simple, heartfelt connection. Television news programs featured interviews, reactions, and expert commentary on child memory and human-animal interaction. Two words that's Rex became a national headline, a viral moment celebrated for its charm, authenticity, and universal appeal. The story transcended borders, cultures, and professions, connecting millions of people through shared admiration and delight. By mid-afternoon, its recognition had become the defining story of the day. The courtroom resumed its procedural function, but the warmth and laughter persisted. Spectators whispered stories of similar moments in their own lives. Journalists framed their coverage around the viral sensation, and jurors occasionally smiled at the memory of pointing confidently at Rex. The courtroom, once a space of solemn authority, had been infused with energy, joy, and an enduring reminder of the simple human experiences that transcend formality. Still perched on her mother's lap, occasionally glanced toward Rex, quietly whispering, "Good boy," her small voice carrying across the room. Officer smiled, Rex responded with gentle acknowledgement, and the audience, reporters, and jurors absorbed the moment with fascination. What had begun as a simple recognition had grown into a profound, multi-layered event, a viral story, a human connection, and an emotional reminder of the impact of innocence on the world. By evening, the story of and Rex had been featured on local news, online news platforms, and social media feeds across the nation. Parents marveled at the toddler's recognition skills, communities celebrated the positive portrayal of law enforcement, and journalists reflected on the unusual yet heartwarming twist in an otherwise routine trial. Simple act of pointing and speaking two words had resonated far beyond the courtroom walls, highlighting the power of innocence, recognition, and unexpected joy in a world often consumed by tension and complexity. The courtroom, while resuming legal proceedings, had forever been transformed by its recognition of Rex. Laughter, smiles, and shared astonishment lingered in the air, blending seamlessly with the procedural functions of the trial. Two simple words, uttered with confidence, clarity, and childlike sincerity, had captured the attention, admiration, and hearts of all who witnessed them, had become a symbol of joy, recognition, and the enduring impact of small voices in moments of great significance. By late afternoon, the courtroom had regained a semblance of procedural order, yet the energy in the room remained palpably different. Still perched on her mother Anna's lap, had become the quiet center of attention. The viral sensation outside the courthouse only heightened the awareness of those inside. Reporters exchanged subtle glances, jurors occasionally smiled at the toddler's persistent focus on Rex, and spectators whispered quietly about the unexpected, heartwarming moment that had briefly turned a serious trial into a scene of joy and wonder. The two simple words that already transformed the mood and would continue to shape perceptions for the rest of the day. The judge, keenly aware of the courtroom's altered atmosphere, addressed the room with calm authority. "Let us proceed with the remaining testimony," he said. His tone carried a measured seriousness, but the subtle warmth in his eyes betrayed an appreciation for the human element that had introduced. Officer and Rex returned to their positions at the front of the courtroom, a quiet but undeniable bond visible between the dog and the toddler. The courtroom, once dominated by formality, now hummed with a mix of anticipation, attentiveness, and emotional engagement. The prosecutor, recognizing the delicate balance between procedural rigor and emotional resonance, began to guide the next phase of testimony. "Rex has assisted in several cases," he explained, "and today's demonstration illustrates not only his capabilities but also the importance of accurate recognition and training in law enforcement operations." While the words were professional, every listener in the courtroom had already seen the real-life proof, its recognition of Rex. That single interaction had humanized the case, softened the room's formal tension, and provided an unexpected emotional touchstone for everyone present. Sensing a shift in attention, leaned slightly forward, her eyes fixed on Rex as if silently anticipating what would come next. She whispered softly, "Rex, good boy," and giggled, her voice carrying the unmistakable purity of a child's joy. Anna smiled, brushing her daughter's hair gently from her forehead, marveling at the child's composure despite the formal setting. Spectators and jurors alike found themselves watching as much as they did the proceedings, captivated by the clear and genuine connection she had established with the dog. Officer observed with a mixture of pride and quiet amazement. "Rex recognizes her too," he whispered, guiding the dog with subtle gestures to remain calm and attentive. The German Shepherd's obedience was impeccable. Every movement was measured, every response deliberate. Yet despite the precision of Rex's training, the dog's interaction with revealed an unexpected warmth, a responsiveness that transcended the formal mechanics of law enforcement procedures. This subtle interaction fascinated those watching, reinforcing the extraordinary nature of what was unfolding. The defense attorney, traditionally reserved and cautious, found herself momentarily disarmed by his innocence. She whispered to her colleague, "I didn't expect a toddler to steal the courtroom's attention," earning a quiet chuckle in response. The proceedings resumed, but the human element had permanently shifted the dynamics. Jurors, typically focused solely on testimony and evidence, found themselves influenced by the subtle emotional resonance that had introduced. Laughter, shared glances, and quiet smiles occasionally punctuated the otherwise serious proceedings, softening the atmosphere without detracting from the trial's integrity. Witnesses took their turns, their testimony occasionally intersecting with his presence. Some glanced toward the toddler, offering smiles that acknowledged her quiet role in the courtroom. Others observed Rex, nodding the dog's calm demeanor and attentive focus, further underscoring the professionalism of K-9 units. His influence, though unintentional, was profound. She had introduced a humanizing element that reminded all participants of the emotional weight behind legal proceedings, a weight often lost amid formality and procedure. Outside the courtroom, the viral sensation continued to escalate. Social media feeds filled with images and short clips of pointing at Rex, speaking her two words and giggling as the dog responded. Hashtags proliferated. Toddler recognizes K9 and Rex courtroom magic. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, interviewing courthouse staff, spectators, and legal professionals. Even national programs began reporting on the interaction, marveling at the extraordinary blend of innocence, memory, and human-animal connection. His brief presence had become emblematic of joy, trust, and emotional clarity in a formal, adult-dominated environment. The prosecutor, aware that the courtroom's emotional charge was subtly influencing perceptions, carefully guided Rex's demonstration. "We ask you to observe," he said, "how trained K9 units respond to familiar stimuli, even under formal and high-pressure conditions." He led Rex through a series of maneuvers: scent identification, obedience commands, and demonstration of controlled movement. To the adult eye, these were routine procedures, highlighting the dog's training. Yet's quiet, persistent recognition lent each maneuver new emotional weight. The audience could see, hear, and almost feel the connection between child and dog, an unspoken understanding that transcended the courtroom walls. As testimony continued, its influence persisted subtly but consistently. Jurors, often focused solely on evidence and legal argument, occasionally found themselves smiling, exchanging glances, or observing the child's interactions with Rex. Witnesses, too, occasionally paused to acknowledge the unique dynamic in the room. Even the stenographer, trained to remain entirely neutral, admitted quietly to a colleague that she found herself watching as much as recording proceedings. The courtroom had become a living, breathing environment, where formal structure intersected with genuine human emotion. Anna watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and awe. Entirely unaware of the broader implications of her actions, had become a focal point for the courtroom's emotional climate. Her recognition of Rex had softened attitudes, fostered subtle empathy, and reminded everyone present of the shared humanity behind every legal argument, testimony, and procedural motion. It was a quiet, persistent influence that no one could ignore, and yet it was entirely innocent and unintentional. Outside, the media continued to amplify the story. Interviews with courthouse attendees highlighted the humanizing effect of recognition. Reporters described the toddler's calm composure, the clarity of her two words, and the undeniable bond between her and Rex. Psychologists provided insights into the memory retention and recognition skills of young children, marveling at its cognitive and emotional awareness. The story was no longer just local news. It had become a national example of innocence, human-animal connection, and the subtle power of small gestures to influence large audiences. Inside the courtroom, the emotional weight carried forward as witnesses completed their testimony. The audience remained engaged, not only in the legal proceedings but in the human story that had unfolded around and Rex. Jurors occasionally exchanged small smiles, Reporters continued recording, and spectators whispered quietly to one another, acknowledging the unusual but profoundly moving interaction. Recognition had subtly guided attention, softened formal tension, and introduced warmth without compromising the seriousness of the trial. Officer, attentive to both professional and emotional elements, guided Rex gently through the final demonstration of the afternoon. The dog remained calm, obedient, and responsive, but the presence of added an unexpected dimension. Her small voice, clear and confident, punctuated the demonstration with subtle encouragement. "Good boy, Rex." Each utterance, simple and genuine, reinforced the bond, leaving an indelible impression on everyone present. It was a reminder of the profound impact that innocence, recognition, and human-animal connection could have, even in the most formal environments. The judge, fully aware of the courtroom's transformed energy, allowed the afternoon session to conclude with a sense of acknowledgement. "We will adjourn for the day," he said, maintaining formal authority while subtly recognizing the unique contributions of the youngest participant. Spectators stood quietly, many exchanging small smiles or murmured comments. His recognition had not only captured attention, but had fundamentally shifted the emotional climate of the courtroom. Laughter, warmth, and joy coexisted seamlessly with solemnity, legal procedure, and professionalism. As Anna gently lifted from her seat, the toddler looked back at Rex with wide eyes, whispering softly, "Bye, Rex." The dog responded with a gentle tilt of the head and a slow wag of the tail, completing a moment of shared understanding that had captivated the entire courtroom. Spectators, jurors, and reporters alike were left with a sense of wonder and admiration. Had, without intention or awareness, transformed the day's proceedings into a story of joy, connection, and lasting emotional resonance. Outside the courthouse, the story continued to dominate social media and news feeds. Parents marveled at the toddler's recognition, law enforcement communities celebrated the positive attention, and ordinary citizens shared clips, images, and personal reflections. Had become a symbol of innocence, clarity, and emotional intelligence, her two words echoing far beyond the courtroom walls. The viral sensation, born from a simple interaction between child and dog, would continue to inspire, amuse, and remind people of the human capacity for wonder and connection. By evening, and Rex's story had fully taken hold. It was more than a viral moment. It was a shared human experience. Courthouse staff, jurors, attorneys, and spectators reflected on the day with smiles and subtle laughter, recognizing that the emotional resonance created by a toddler had permanently altered the tone and memory of the trial. Innocence, observation, and confidence had provided a subtle but profound reminder. Even the smallest voices can leave a lasting impact, and moments of recognition and connection can redefine an environment. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with an unusual mix of anticipation and curiosity. Though the trial had resumed its formal rhythm, its presence still cast a subtle, yet palpable, influence over the room. Reporters and spectators arrived early, cameras in tow, eager to capture even the smallest gestures from the toddler whose two simple words that transformed a standard legal proceeding into a viral sensation. Jurors, too, were present ahead of schedule, exchanging whispers about the previous day's remarkable events, though they remained focused on the trial at hand. Perched on her mother's lap once more, held her stuffed bear tightly, glancing occasionally at Rex, who sat obediently beside Officer. The German Shepherd's calm demeanor reflected years of disciplined training, yet his subtle responsiveness suggested a bond that transcended protocol. The courtroom, a place usually dominated by procedure and decorum, had become a stage for subtle but profound human emotion. His quiet presence provided both focus and warmth, guiding the audience's attention without words. The judge entered promptly and the room fell into the expected hush, but it was a softer silence than usual, tempered by the memory of the prior day's unexpected charm. "We shall continue," he announced, maintaining authority while allowing the human element introduced by to linger in the atmosphere. Officer positioned Rex near the front of the courtroom, and the German Shepherd remained alert, poised, yet exuding calm. It was as if he sensed the significance of the day, aware that attention would once again play a central role in the proceedings. The prosecutor began the day's testimony with renewed diligence, calling a key witness who had been involved in the case's pivotal events. The witness's words carried weight, but their impact was subtly colored by the emotional undercurrent introduced by jurors. While attentive to details and legal argument, occasionally allowed glances toward the toddler, whose innocence and clarity seemed to serve as a quiet reminder of the human dimension behind the case. Every gesture, every gaze from, subtly reinforced the sense of empathy within the room. Sensing the energy around her, whispered softly, "Rex, watch," pointing toward the dog with tiny, confident fingers. Officer, trained to respond to subtle cues, guided Rex into a brief demonstration of alertness and obedience, showcasing the dog's discipline while maintaining the gentle connection with the child. Spectators, jurors, and even attorneys watched closely, struck by the blend of professionalism and emotional resonance. It was a rare moment where formality and warmth coexisted seamlessly, capturing attention without distraction from the case's proceedings. The courtroom cameras, journalists, and spectators documented every interaction. Social media buzzed continuously outside the courthouse, as clips of giving subtle directions to Rex circulated widely. Hashtags proliferated. "And Rex, toddler courtroom magic, viral recognition." Parents, educators, and animal enthusiasts marveled at the toddler's awareness and the dog's responsiveness, commenting on the extraordinary connection between child and animal. The courtroom's unusual dynamic had already reached audiences far beyond the physical walls of the courthouse. During the testimony, his presence continued to influence the room's emotional tone. Jurors, who were typically trained to remain neutral and detached, occasionally exchanged small smiles or subtle nods when whispered encouragement to Rex. The prosecutor, conscious of this effect, leveraged it subtly to underscore key points about the reliability of K-9 units, trust in trained animals, and the emotional impact of community engagement. Witnesses, too, found themselves more at ease, their voices carrying slightly more warmth than in a typical courtroom setting. Anna, observing her daughter with quiet pride, whispered softly, "Be gentle," brushing her daughter's hair from her forehead. Giggled in response, tilting her head toward Rex, her small eyes wide with anticipation and focus. To Anna, it was a reminder of how extraordinary moments could arise from everyday interactions. This recognition had not only captured the courtroom's attention, but had also softened the atmosphere, transforming tension into engagement and procedural formality into shared human experience. As the day progressed, the climax of the trial approached. The judge called for closing arguments, and the courtroom, though filled with a sense of gravity, was undeniably influenced by the emotional resonance introduced by her quiet presence. Her recognition of Rex and her innate innocence had permeated the room, reminding everyone of the profound human dimension behind legal proceedings. Jurors, spectators, and legal professionals alike felt the weight of this subtle but impactful reminder. The prosecutor delivered a measured, compelling closing argument. "Your Honor, ladies and of the jury," he began, "today we have witnessed not only the evidence presented before you, but also the extraordinary ways in which human experience intersects with truth and recognition. We have seen the bond between a trained K-9 and a child, an innocent observer whose clarity has reminded us of the importance of accuracy, intuition, and trust." The room remained silent, but the emotional undertone was unmistakable. His prior actions had infused the proceedings with a unique warmth and significance. The defense attorney, acknowledging the emotional climate, adjusted her approach. "Members of the jury," she said, her voice firm yet subtly empathetic, "while evidence and procedure remain paramount, today's events remind us of the humanity that underpins every case. Recognition, intuition, and trust, qualities demonstrated by both and Rex, highlight the importance of perception, attention, and the shared human experience that transcends mere testimony. Her words resonated differently than they would have in a typical courtroom, reflecting the profound emotional engagement that had fostered. Sensing the heightened attention, whispered softly to Rex, "Good boy," tapping gently on his side. Officer, acknowledging the cue, allowed Rex to respond with a gentle tilt of the head and a subtle wag of his tail. The audience collectively inhaled, recognizing the significance of the small, unassuming gestures. Had become the focal point of a moment that blended innocence, recognition, and emotional resonance into a climax that transcended the procedural elements of the trial. The jurors, their attention partly focused on quiet interactions, were subtly reminded of the weight of their responsibility. The child's presence had humanized the case, creating a shared understanding of the importance of care, observation, and empathy. Witnesses, attorneys, and spectators alike absorbed the quiet, transformative impact of recognition of Rex, acknowledging that sometimes, even the smallest voices can influence perceptions, soften judgments, and heighten awareness of the human dimension behind every legal decision. Outside the courtroom, the viral sensation continued to grow. Social media posts detailed the interactions between and Rex, highlighting the child's composure, the dog's responsiveness, and the subtle emotional currents that had transformed the courtroom. News outlets aired interviews with courthouse staff, reporters, and even jurors, who described the extraordinary impact of his presence. Psychologists and educators provided commentary on child memory, recognition skills, and the power of innocence to influence adult behavior. Simple act of recognition had become a cultural touchstone, celebrated for its authenticity and charm. Back inside the courtroom, the judge prepared to give final instructions to the jury. "Members of the jury," he said, his voice firm yet carrying a subtle warmth, "you have witnessed both the evidence and the human dimension of this trial. Consider all aspects carefully, thoughtfully, and with the recognition that every moment, every observation, every gesture carries weight in the pursuit of justice." His acknowledgement of the human elements introduced by was subtle but unmistakable, reinforcing the profound influence of her presence. Perched quietly on her mother's lap, observed the proceedings with wide eyes, occasionally whispering to Rex, "Stay here," or "Good boy," her tiny voice carrying across the otherwise formal room. Each utterance, though simple, reinforced the bond between child and dog while simultaneously guiding the courtroom's emotional energy. Spectators, jurors, and reporters alike absorbed the significance. Innocence and recognition had created a bridge between the rigidity of law and the warmth of human connection. As the trial reached its emotional crescendo, the collective energy in the courtroom was a fusion of anticipation, reflection, and subtle joy. Recognition of Rex had transformed the proceedings into a shared human experience, reminding everyone present of the value of empathy, observation, and emotional engagement. Jurors prepared to deliberate, witnesses concluded their testimony, and spectators quietly reflected on the remarkable events that had unfolded before them. Anna held close, brushing her hair back and whispering, "You were amazing today," smiled, giggled softly, and whispered once more, "Rex, good boy." Officer gently patted Rex, who responded with calm, attentive acknowledgement. The courtroom, though returning to its formal duties, carried an enduring warmth. Two words, simple as they were, had reached a climax of emotional resonance that would be remembered far beyond the trial itself. In the final moments of the day, the viral sensation outside the courthouse reached new heights. News outlets, social media platforms, and local communities celebrated its calm composure, her accurate recognition, and the subtle, profound influence she had exerted over the courtroom. The story became more than a viral clip. It was a testament to the power of innocence, observation, and shared human experience. Had demonstrated that even the smallest voices can command attention, evoke emotion, and create lasting impact in moments of great significance. By late afternoon, The courtroom settled into a quiet, expectant hum. The trial had reached its final stages, and the jurors were prepared to deliberate. Yet even in this formal, structured environment, the memory of recognition of Rex lingered like a gentle undercurrent, softening tension and filling the room with warmth. What had begun as a typical, procedural day had transformed into an extraordinary human experience, reminding all present of the subtle power of innocence, observation, and connection. Still perched on her mother Anna's lap, clutched her stuffed bear with one hand while occasionally reaching toward Rex with the other. The German shepherd, poised and attentive, remained calm and obedient, responding subtly to gestures. Officer guided the dog carefully, aware that this final phase of the trial carried a weight far greater than any K-9 demonstration. The courtroom's energy was a mixture of anticipation, reflection, and quiet admiration, with at the center of it all, her small presence leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. The judge, maintaining his authority yet aware of the extraordinary circumstances, addressed the courtroom with measured solemnity. "Members of the jury," he began, "you have now heard all testimony, observed demonstrations, and witnessed events that highlight not only the evidence before you, but also the human dimension inherent in every case. You are to deliberate carefully, thoughtfully, and with full consideration of the facts, context, and responsibilities entrusted to you." His tone conveyed respect for the jury's role, while subtly acknowledging the emotional resonance had introduced into the room. As the jurors prepared to leave for deliberation, whispers filled the audience, softly recounting the previous day's viral sensation. Reporters took notes, cameras adjusted to capture the quiet moments, and spectators glanced at and Rex with admiration. Social media updates continued to circulate outside, chronicling every interaction, every gesture, and every subtle nuance of the toddler's recognition. Hashtags proliferated. And Rex, toddler courtroom magic, innocence in court, each reflecting the widespread fascination with the unexpected emotional heartbeat of the trial. Sensing movement among the jurors, whispered softly to Rex, "Stay here," and patted him gently. The dog responded with a subtle wag of his tail, tilting his head in acknowledgement. The audience collectively absorbed the moment, recognizing the quiet yet profound connection that had influenced the courtroom throughout the trial. Jurors, as they filed out, exchanged knowing glances, reminded of the balance between law, procedure, and the human experiences that often transcend formal rules. Anna smiled at her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You've been amazing," she whispered, giggled softly, her eyes sparkling as she glanced at Rex once more. The child had no awareness of the viral sensation, the media coverage, or the subtle influence she had exerted on the courtroom. For her, it was simple recognition and interaction, an innocent, joyful connection with a dog she trusted and admired. Yet the impact of that simple act had resonated far beyond her understanding, touching the hearts of strangers, jurors, and legal professionals alike. Outside the courthouse, media coverage had reached a fever pitch. Local television stations aired segments showing pointing at Rex and uttering her two famous words. News anchors marveled at the toddler's composure, the dog's responsiveness, and the subtle, emotional resonance that had transformed a formal courtroom into a moment of shared human connection. Social media posts went viral, accumulating thousands of shares, comments, and reactions within hours. Parents, educators, and law enforcement supporters praised recognition, marveling at the extraordinary blend of innocence and clarity demonstrated in her simple observation. Inside, the trial's conclusion drew near. Jurors returned from deliberation, their expressions a mixture of focus and contemplation. The judge addressed them with his usual composure, yet the room still carried the warmth and emotional undertone introduced by. Spectators and reporters held their breath as the verdict was announced. Unaware of the stakes, continued to observe Rex with quiet attention, whispering soft words of encouragement. Her presence, though small in physical size, had become monumental in emotional impact. The foreperson of the jury stood and delivered the verdict clearly and formally. "We, the jury, find the defendant." The courtroom fell into a tense silence, every eye fixed on the proceedings. But in the background whispered softly to Rex, "Good boy," her voice carrying an unexpected lightness into the room. The moment highlighted the profound intersection of innocence and gravity, emphasizing the subtle ways that human connection can coexist with formal authority, judgment, and responsibility. As the verdict was formally recorded, murmurs of acknowledgement and relief rippled through the courtroom. Jurors quietly returned to their seats, exchanging subtle smiles and glances, many reflecting on how recognition of Rex had shaped the emotional atmosphere throughout the trial. Spectators and reporters alike recognized that the child's simple presence had introduced warmth, empathy, and humanity into a space typically governed by tension, procedure, and formality. His actions had created a lasting emotional legacy within the courthouse. After the official proceedings concluded, this moment with Rex became the focal point for photographs, interviews, and informal acknowledgments. Officer allowed Rex to sit calmly beside as she gently patted him. "Good boy, Rex," she whispered again, giggling softly. Reporters captured the interaction, recognizing that the simplicity of the toddler's recognition had far more resonance than any formal demonstration or courtroom procedure could achieve. The human-animal bond had become emblematic of innocence, clarity, and emotional authenticity. Anna whispered softly too, her voice full of pride and awe. "People are going to remember this forever," she said. Tilting her head toward Rex, giggled and whispered, "Bye, Rex." The German shepherd responded with a gentle wag of his tail and a slow tilt of the head, a subtle acknowledgement of the bond that had captured the attention of everyone present. Spectators, jurors, and reporters alike were reminded that sometimes the smallest gestures can carry the deepest significance. Outside the courthouse, the viral sensation reached audiences nationwide. Clips of recognition were shared on major news outlets, social media platforms, and community pages. Parents praised her composure, educators highlighted her memory and recognition skills, and law enforcement agencies celebrated the positive depiction of K-9 units. Psychologists and child development experts offered commentary, emphasizing the exceptional cognitive and emotional awareness demonstrated by a toddler whose actions had inadvertently influenced a room full of adults, had become a symbol of joy, trust, and the subtle power of innocence. Back inside, the courtroom staff quietly reflected on the extraordinary events. Clerks, bailiffs, and reporters remarked on how his presence had softened the tension, humanized proceedings, and reminded everyone that justice, while formal, is ultimately about people. Jurors noted how the toddler's recognition had influenced their perception of the emotional weight of the case, reinforcing the importance of empathy alongside legal judgment. The courtroom had experienced an unprecedented convergence of innocence, professionalism, and human connection, leaving an indelible mark on all who participated. Unaware of her growing fame, continued to interact with Rex, softly patting him and whispering encouraging words. Officer observed, quietly proud, as the dog responded with calm attentiveness. The simplicity of their interaction highlighted a profound truth. Sometimes, the most powerful influence comes not from force or authority, but from trust, recognition, and gentle, heartfelt engagement. The courtroom had witnessed this truth firsthand, and the memory would linger long after the trial concluded. As the courthouse emptied, spectators and reporters shared smiles, recounting the story of and Rex to one another. The viral clips continued to circulate, inspiring comments, shares, and admiration from viewers across the country. Parents marveled at the toddler's poise. Law enforcement professionals reflected on the emotional resonance of K-9 work, and everyday citizens were reminded of the profound impact that small, innocent gestures can have in a world often dominated by formality, stress, and routine. Anna carried carefully, her daughter still clutching her stuffed bear. Calm composure, her accurate recognition, and her quiet joy had left an enduring impression on the courthouse. Officer led Rex toward the exit, allowing the dog one final glance toward, who waved softly and whispered, "Bye, Rex." The bond between child and dog, though simple and unassuming, had influenced an entire room, transforming a procedural trial into a shared human experience celebrated both inside and outside the courthouse. In the days following the trial, the story of and Rex continued to captivate audiences. Local news stations aired extended segments, social media engagement continued to grow, and educators and psychologists discussed the extraordinary cognitive and emotional skills demonstrated by the toddler. This brief two-word recognition had evolved into a cultural touchstone, a reminder that innocence, clarity, and connection have the power to transform even the most formal environments, leaving lasting impressions on countless lives. Ultimately, the trial concluded, but its moment remained a permanent part of the courtroom's legacy. Jurors, attorneys, witnesses, and spectators carried the memory of her recognition with them, a subtle but enduring reminder of the human dimension behind legal proceedings. Outside, the media coverage had cemented her brief appearance as a viral moment of innocence and emotional resonance, touching hearts nationwide. Story demonstrated that even the smallest voices, in the simplest acts of recognition, can create profound, lasting impact. As Anna walked home that evening, the toddler remained animated yet calm, pointing occasionally at familiar sights and whispering small words of recognition. Her impact on the courtroom, the media, and the public at large was unknowingly complete. Two simple words, uttered with clarity, confidence, and pure innocence, had not only identified a police dog but had bridged humanity, law, and empathy in a moment that would be remembered for years.